Homecoming may be almost in sight for wildfire evacuees from Yellowknife. The two fires threatening the capital city are being held, and officials are in the middle of a 5-stage plan to make it safe for people to return.
There's still some uncertainty of exactly the date when residents can come home, but we're one step closer to that. So that's been incredible news this week.
That is Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty as we spoke just a few minutes ago. She says calls are now going out. They started yesterday to essential staff like healthcare workers, waste plant workers, that kind of job. Calls are going out to call them back to the city. Essential services and core businesses will have to get up and running before everyone else can start coming home. But that is the starting point for Hillary Johnstone, listening into the conversation I just had with the mayor and bringing us up to date on what's happening in Yellowknife. Hillary, good morning.
Heather, good morning. Well, you mentioned some of those essential workers, hospital workers, municipal workers, grocery store workers, all the sorts of people that you need to make a community work. Those people will have to return first, and then residents will be allowed to come back. And certainly the message that we had there from the mayor of Yellowknife, Rebecca Alty, is to not get in your car and return until you hear that it is good for you to return. Saying there, of course, that there are 20,000 people in that community. Only about 1,600 stayed behind. That means there are thousands of people that are going to need to make their way back to Yellowknife. And the point that the mayor made is that in some cases, people have gone to Edmonton. That's an 18-hour drive. In other cases, they've gone elsewhere in Alberta. Maybe they've gone to Saskatchewan or to family in British Columbia. So some people are going to have a huge journey in front of them. But yes, she said, not talking about weeks, likely more talking about days here, but it's still going to be a while. This is not going to be immediate. She's asking people to be patient. Here's a little bit more of what we heard from her.
Please don't come back now if you're not a critical worker. We do have checkpoints up, and if your name's not on that list, you will be turned away. So don't waste your gas money trying to come back. There's a list of folks, and if your name's not on there, you will be turned away. So again, we'll let residents know when they can come home.
And what about all those people who got on airplanes to get out of that community? Well, what we heard from Mayor Alty is that, yes, it's going to take even longer to bring some of those people back who maybe flew out, saying, for example, the city's shelters need to be back up and running before some of those people who maybe were on those evacuation flights can return. In other cases, people who maybe carpooled out of the community, maybe their ride has gone elsewhere and they're going to need to find a way to get back on a plane now. That's going to take time. And just finally here, Heather, the other point that Mayor Alty made is that she's been noticing that commercial airlines have still been selling flights. She says they do not have any sort of inside information about when those evacuation orders are going to lift. So she's saying just be mindful of that if you see a flight pop up online, that does not mean that you're going to be able to book it and go home. She says in a lot of these cases, those airlines have actually been canceling those flights about 24 hours out. So just be mindful of that. If you go online today and see a flight that goes tomorrow or the next day, that does not necessarily mean that you will actually be able to return home to Yellowknife on that flight.
I thought that was an interesting point she made, as you quite rightly reiterate. She also mentioned that one of the complicating factors for people driving back, it may be held in Yellowknife itself, but Hay River, other communities in the South Slave region, there are still very much worrisome, out-of-control fire situations that may impede the drive back. So what are we hearing about that part of the territory, Hillary?
That's right. And she made that point clearly that just yesterday, for example, that highway closed at one point because of active fire. So that's going to be a consideration here, too, that such limited ways to get back into Yellowknife. That highway, of course, we were monitoring it during the evacuation phase, one way out of the community. So be mindful of that there are going to be traffic jams and the possibility that the roads might need to be closed because of fires. As you say, Heather, Hay River, of course, is an area that we are keeping a very close eye on with that fire now less than 2 kilometers away from the city. We know that fire crews had quite the day on Sunday battling some of the conditions. A little bit of improvement yesterday, but now there are heat warnings in place. Highs of 29 to 35 degrees Celsius. Yes, cooling off at night, but those daytime highs, of course, not what officials want. So telling everyone that they are on the defensive at this point, and that even if there's maybe some encouraging news for people in Yellowknife, those fires have now been held, not necessarily the case elsewhere in the territory at this point anyways.
Hilary Johnstone, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The latest update there.